大家大家晚上好。我们首先宣布一个，我们明天会做Upstart，因为他们今天刚刚发布了2021年的年报，所以我现在正在看，所以明天应该会大概做些总结，然后只是针对会员会推出一期节目，讲一下他的年报里面要注意的内容，然后并回答大家的问题。这个只是对会员，因为最近一个星期的几乎所有视频都是全部免费的，没有专门针对会员的视频，所以明天会对会员10点半同样的时间做 Upstart 的直播，讲他的年报。今天讲这家公司 Roku 是昨天财报，然后股市反应也是不好，然后所以我们今天讲一下他们这家公司到底是什么问题，以及我对它总体的看法。我们之前我在留言区也发了帖子，我们之前曾经讲过这家公司的商业模式和我对它的基本观点，大家当然现在来不及了，希望在来直播之前已经看了那集的节目，如果看过相对就比较容易理解。所以我的格式基本上还是这样，我会放一下它回放的内容，但是呢我回放会分成2部分，第一部分就是它的 CEO 和 CFO 前面的算是开始的陈述，讲自己的公司，讲他的对未来明年对今年2022年的预期，然后呢我会停一下，然后按照他讲的这些东西再把他的财报同样的东西跟大家讲一下，然后跟大家提示一下后面这些财报里面重点的是哪几方面的内容，因为后面那些分析师在后半段问的问题也都集中在3-4个方面，所以这样希望这种方式对大家理解比较有好处。 OK， 然后最后当然是听完后一部分就是分析师的问答之后，然后就是我对这家公司的看法，最后是回答会员们的问题。 OK， 所以我们试一下这种方式怎么样。然后那我们现在就来放他的电话会议，首先是 CEO 和 CFO 对公司的介绍，这个季度的介绍。
Thank you, Conrad, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Roku delivered another record year in 2021. We have an enormous opportunity in front of us that we expect to capture. We have built and continue to expand a set of unique assets for this purpose. These include the Roku operating system, the Roku channel, and our sophisticated streaming ad platform. Our scale has passed 60 million active accounts, and we remain focused on being the best and largest streaming platform. The Roku operating system is poised to gain further market share as TVs shift away from costly proprietary operating systems. We expect manufacturers who want a best-in-class operating system to choose the Roku OS, which is purpose-built for TV. The Roku channel continues to gain momentum. Free, ad-supported services are the fastest-growing segment in TV streaming. In just 4 years, we built a flywheel that propelled the Roku channel to a top 5 position on our platform in the US. This success is a result of combining a robust content portfolio with our ability to send consumers the Roku channel with superior content marketing and advertising features. Our ad platform is built for TV streaming. We believe large traditional TV advertisers will continue to shift to Roku for the targeting, measurement, optimization, and superior ROI that we provide. And for digital-first advertisers and small and medium businesses, Roku makes advertising on TV more accessible. We remain focused on maximizing our competitive differentiators, extending our industry leadership, and driving growth both in the US and internationally. With that, let me hand the call over to Steve.
Thanks, Anthony. Before taking your questions, I'll walk through operational and financial highlights and address outlook. In Q4, we grew our active account base by over 3.7 million, resulting in 8.9 million incremental active accounts for the year, thus ending 2021 with 60.1 million active accounts. While we continue to scale, we believe that the slowdown in the active account growth rate in the second half of the year was, in large part, attributable to global supply chain disruptions that have impacted the overall U.S. TV market and our TV OEM partners in particular. This was partially offset by Roku player unit sales in 2021 that remained above pre-COVID-19 levels. In addition to increasing our scale, we are also growing engagement on our platform, with 2021 streaming hours up 14.4 billion year over year to a record 73.2 billion hours. In Q4, we grew streaming hours 15% year over year, while full year grew 25% year over year as we continue to outperform viewing hour growth of both traditional TV and other TV streaming platforms. Average streaming hours per active account per day was relatively flat year over year as we lapped the pandemic-related demand spike. As a reminder, please see our shareholder letter for the full financial details from the quarter and the fiscal year, and I'll highlight a few items. In Q4, total net revenue increased 33% year over year to $865 million. Platform revenue was up 49% year over year to a record $704 million, driven by strong content distribution and M&E growth. This was partially offset by temporary softness in advertising spend within the auto and CPG verticals, which have been most impacted by product availability issues related to supply chain disruptions. Q4 player revenue declined 9% year over year, but was up 7% versus Q4 2019. Player unit sales were relatively flat year over year for Q4 and down 4% year over year for 2021. Gross profit, one of our key financial performance metrics, grew 24% year over year in Q4 to a record $380 million. Q4 platform gross margin was 60%, which was down 4.5 points sequentially as the platform business shifted toward a greater mix of video advertising. Player margin was pressured by supply chain challenges as we chose to prioritize account acquisition and insulate consumers from higher costs. We estimate that excluding the year-over-year impact of component and logistic cost increases on the player business, total gross margin would have been roughly 4 points higher for Q4 2021. Q4 adjusted EBITDA was $87 million, and we ended the quarter with over $2.1 billion of cash equivalents, restricted cash, and short-term investments. Looking to the first quarter, we anticipate total net revenue of $720 million, up 25% year over year, gross profit of $360 million with a gross margin of 50%, and adjusted EBITDA of $55 million. Now, I'll provide additional color on each of these estimates. Q1 total net revenue of $720 million reflects our expectations for standard Q1 seasonality combined with the ongoing impact of supply chain disruptions on advertising spend within certain verticals. Next, conditions that positively affected gross profit and gross margin in Q1 2021 have shifted. The platform business, which had a larger portion of high-margin content distribution in Q1 2021, is expected to have a greater portion of video advertising in Q1 2022. Additionally, the player business, which had a strong positive gross margin in Q1 2021, is expected to have a negative gross margin in Q1 2022 as we continue to absorb elevated supply chain related costs. Finally, our outlook for Q1 adjusted EBITDA is $55 million due to higher OpEx, which we expect to increase approximately 55% year over year as we plan to invest aggressively this year. As a comparison, adjusted EBITDA in Q1 2021 was $126 million, driven by a combination of very strong platform growth and lower OpEx growth as we slowed down investments due to COVID uncertainty. This demonstrates a strong return from prior monetization investments and the inherent leverage in our business model. Looking to the full year, I want to share my thoughts on supply chain, our investment strategy, and our confidence in the business. First, supply chain. While we have seen some component costs decrease relative to peak prices in 2021, overall component and logistics costs remain significantly elevated and availability issues persist. Thus, we believe these disruptions will continue to negatively affect the size of the TV market and our player margins in the short term. And we assume that ad spend in certain verticals will continue to be impacted by ongoing inventory availability issues until conditions normalize. Second, we intend to continue to invest in our growth. To date, our investments in people, technology, and content have been successful, as demonstrated by our strong ARPU growth. Roku's U.S. active account base has surpassed the U.S. video subscribers of all of the cable companies combined. Growing our share and extending our lead, both in the U.S. and international markets, is a core part of our plan. For full year 2022, we plan to maintain adjusted EBITDA roughly in line with 2020 levels on an absolute basis, as we continue to invest against a significant opportunity and drive continued innovation on the platform. Third, even with the volatility that is expected to result from ongoing supply chain disruptions, we believe Roku will continue to grow. And our estimate for full year 2022 year-over-year revenue growth is in the mid-30s. Our core belief is that all of our secular growth drivers that favor streaming remain in place, and we have an exceptional platform as our foundation to build upon. There is a long runway of growth in front of us, and we are investing to capture this opportunity. We remain confident in our business and our ability to execute. With that, let's turn it over to questions. Operator?
所以这是他们的第一部分，就是 CEO Anthony， 然后跟 CFO 讲了一下他们对公司的这个季度以及对明年的预期。那么来看一下具体的数字，希望给大家一个大致的印象。如果我们看2021年全年的话，其实各方面指标都不错，收入全年增长 55%， 然后 gross profit 增长 74%， 活跃用户然后大家在平台花的数量增长也都不错，但是可能是让市场就是低于市场预期的是它第四季度，就是刚刚发布这个 Q4 这个栏，在这个季度呢，然后它的增长就明显变缓所以这是后面他们分析师会重要问到的第一个问题，就是为什么第一个没有达到预期，第二个比前面几个季度有这么大幅度的变缓。管理层给的解释一方面是 supply chain 就是供应链的问题，为什么影响这么一家流媒体的公司？主要是这样的，因为我们之前讲这家公司模式时候讲过了，它有硬件的业务是它比如说它那个卖多少台电视，这电视当中有多少台是原装的，就带着Roku的系统的，这对它发展特别重要。所以现在这一段时间，由于这个供应链出了问题很多它的电视厂商根本做不出来，因为它没有能生产，那些生产出来的电视，然后又价格又很高，所以整个过去几个季度的美国电视就是那个电视机市场是萎缩的，所以对它来讲它就不利，因为它本身有一部分增长就是这种电视的增长自然带动的，所以这部分对它就非常不利。所以这是一个 supply chain 的问题，就是供应链现在在美国有重大的问题，影响到他们电视销量。第二个就是说第四个季度跟去年相比增长不快，只有 33%， 是因为去年第四季度是它增长非常快的一年。就是这种比较通常就是你要看相对的，就是如果去年它增长很慢，那这同一个三个月的时间，那今年增长非常快就可以理解。相反，它就像这样Roku的情况，就是去年是在疫情的期间，所以它各方面增长这个季度第四季度非常快，到了那个2021年的第四季度，就是前面一个季度，它的增长相比就没有那么快了。这是比较重要的两个原因。然后，所以这是对整个这个季度的，我觉得管理层的解释。然后后面就提到 比如说这是他的，大家可以有兴趣看他的这个给股东的信，他就讲到他的整个生意模式是分成3部分。第一部分是 building scale， 就是建立规模，这就是说要把自己的那个活跃账户，就是有多少人用Roku这个平台，这个数量做起来。所以你如果看右边，它过去几年从17年不到2000万到现在超过6000万，增长还是很不错的。然后，所以这是第一个部分。然后第二部分呢，它叫 drive engagement， 就是让大家在这个平台上花的时间更多，这就是 streaming hour， 就是大家在这个流媒体平台花多少时间，同样也是有不错的增长，去年增长了25%，这是700多万个亿，700多亿小时。花在这个平台上，大家看电视，就美国人看电视时间是很长的。然后这是第二步，就是先把用户做起来，然后第二步让用户在自己的平台上花很多时间，然后第三步就是赚钱，就是 monetization， 就是这部分。所以这部分它衡量的指标就是 ARPU， 就是average revenue per user， 就是每个用户平均每个用户他能赚到多少钱。比如说他17年平均每个用户只能赚$13，现在一下增长到$41，所以这种增长也是不错的。所以这几个增长其实是叠加的，它一方面用户在增加，同时每个用户他能拿到的钱又在增长，所以这是叠加的水平。所以这些几个指标就决定了他过去几年为什么收入都会有比较快的增长。所以这是对他公司整体的介绍。当然，它这个我们之前讲过，它这个向用户收费其实包括好几个部分。硬件我们讲过，其实硬件它是不赚钱的，这是对消费者，比如说你买电视里面就带着Roku所以这是一个。然后它另外就是Roku它自己卖那个 bar， 就是它那些什么不知道叫那个 player， 就是播放器然后那个它也收费，但是那个收费非常低，它成本都覆盖不了。所以那个就是说让大家用这个平台而已，所以这是一部分是对消费者的收费。第二部分呢，就是对广告主，就是他的广告收入，因为他之所以跟 Netflix 不同 ，Netflix 没有广告，而且强调过很多次，他说我将来不会做广告，所以他这个平台就是相当于下一档的，就是我把它理解成穷人的 Netflix， 就是说你可以免费的看里面多数的内容。所以对他来讲的话，就是他就把这个免费的平台做成了很大的广告平台，让广告主来这上面做广告。然后，所以这是对广告主的收费，这是第二部分。第三部分呢，就是对他平台里面这个叫 content distribution， 就是比如说像里面Netflix， 我相信是不付钱的，或者付的很少。迪士尼然后 Peacock， 就其他 Showtime。HBO 这些家他们要跟 Netflix 去竞争，要做同样流媒体平台，也要收费，按那个收入向用户收费。但是呢，因为Roku现在是一个很大的系统，很多人都在用Roku的这个电视操作系统，所以他们如果这些人要想在Roku这个里面放一个 App 做自己的分销，让大家去看它的，然后就要向Roku交钱，所以这就是一种收入分成的一个概念。所以这是一方面。第二方面就是说，比如说像这个这个电视剧，我向大家推荐 Succession， 中文叫继承之战，应该是播完了第3季，反正蛮精彩的，我个人感觉。然后你看它，如果 HBO， 如果大家都是在这个屏幕上，如果 HBO 在这个季度要主推这一个剧，它就会向Roku购买这个相当于一个广告的一个版面，就在这个主页上，然后就把自己的广告放上去，说你要不要看我这个电视剧？所以这部分它也会收入。所以就是说，它一方面是一个入口，供这些其他流媒体的公司把自己的用户，然后用Roku的用户发展成自己的用户。第二个就是向Roku的这些用户来推广自己的广告，来推广自己的产品和推广自己的那些电影和电视剧。所以这就是这两部分，它都是向它的那些流媒体平台伙伴来收的。所以它的收入主要是消费者，消费者这几乎是不赚钱的，就是那个硬件。第二个是广告，广告很重要。第三个就是这个流媒体其他平台的，像它的那种收入的分成，如果是订阅的话，或者是这种广告位， 这种就市场活动相当于是，所以它的平台是一个广告主，就你如果做电视广告是一个很好的平台，那对这些流媒体商来讲，其实就相当于他们的一个市场渠道，怎么用如库的渠道打通更多的消费者，让他去订阅，比如说迪士尼或者 Peacock HBO 这些不同的流媒体频道。对不对？所以它的收入主要是分成这几个部分。我们上次其实讲过了，这是指的广告。然后最后一部分就是它对今年的预期，这个也是很多人觉得有问题的一个地方。所以后面的大家的问题很多集中在这一方面，就是说它全年的预期其实还 OK， 收入是增长35%，但有点奇怪，就是说它整个全年35%。但一季度只有25%的增长，所以大家可能就感觉这里面可能有问题，因为比如为什么一季度25到全年反而35，就意味着他们后面2个季度可能增长要比前面反而要快很多。管理层给的解释就是说，还是那个第一个比较的问题，比如前期那2个季度跟去年同期比起来相对要差一点，后面2个季度比起来就相对比较容易，因为那个疫情那个时候基本已经过去了，对不对？然后这是第一个，第二个就是说，我们刚才还是讲的同样的 supply chain 的问题，就是供应链的问题，还是导致了它这部分第一个它的硬件就是用户的增长会有问题，第二个由于它的广告主当中有一些是做汽车的，还有是做 CPG 就是快消品。快速消费品，他们这2部分广告主的收入会受影响，所以他们在这个 supply chain 有问题的这个期间，这1年多2年的时间，他的做广告的那个预算就会少了，对不对？所以这些对他也有比较大的影响。后面我们可以讲一下为什么，比如他们会有影响，那 Tradex 或者是 Facebook 或别的方面，这个影响就会小，因为它是跟电视广告这个性质是相关的。所以这是另外一个问题，就是说大家会问说你这个好像从25以下到全年35好像有问题。第三个这里面没有写，但刚才这个 CFO 已经提到了，就是他对费用的预期，这是另外一个分析师后面你会听到问的比较多的问题，就是说为什么费用比前面2年要增加这么多？然后他们就解释他们现在要做国际扩张，所以他们要花更多的钱。雇更多的员工放在更多的国家，这个我们同样在上次的视频也提过，就他的公司要去做的规模，就比 Netflix 要慢要困难。为什么呢？因为 Netflix 它是自己所有原创内容，它不靠别人，你只要是它的用户，用任何的平台，手机、电视，所有东西都可以看。而且它的原创内容一旦拿下之后，全世界的版权是一样的，所以它可以同时一下在全世界100多个国家或几十个国家1天之内全都发布都没问题。但是如库不可以，为什么呢？因为它像刚才解释了，它需要硬件的支持，它需要电视的生产商把它的如库放进去，然后希望这些电视生产商在不同的国家占据比较高的份额。第二个，它需要跟不同国家的那些流媒体的平台做合作，把内容放进去第三个，它要再找广告主，所以它这个整个这个生态系统比较复杂，它要牵扯的方面都比较多，所以这就为什么它可能它不像 Netflix 一下可以同时发布那么多产品，发布在那么多国家，它可能就需要在一个国家一个国家的单独的来，所以就会比较慢，同时投资也会时间比较长，然后会比较大，所以大家可以后面听一下分析师的问题，主要集中在这么几个方面 ，OK？ 所以我们现在就来听一下分析师的问题。
Thank you. Again, ladies and gentlemen, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star then 1 on your touch-tone telephone. Again, to ask a question, please press star then 1. Our first question comes from Justin Patterson of KeyBank. Your line is open.
Great. Thank you very much. Steve, just going back to the annual revenue guidance of 35%, that reflects a very healthy acceleration from Q1 levels. Could you talk about what gives you the confidence in that and perhaps tease out some of the contribution from player and platform to get there? And then related, you've called out aggressive investment. Could you talk about some of the top priorities and whether things like controlling more of TV manufacturing play into that? Thank you.
Hey, Justin, this is Anthony. I'll kick off the answer and then turn it over to Steve. At a high level, the streaming platform business that we're a leader in is a very large global opportunity. And we're super well positioned to keep expanding our leadership in it. And so we're going to keep investing appropriately to the opportunity and our business. If you think about what we've accomplished so far with the money we've invested in our business, we've built some extremely valuable assets. The Roku operating system, which is the industry's only purpose-built operating system for television, is the #1 TV OS in the country, and is making great progress internationally. The Roku TV program itself, where we build complete reference designs, license those to manufacturers, and then help merchandise them at retail. It's been a super successful program for us. The Roku channel, which is a top 5 channel on our platform, reached households with 80 million people in the quarter, and it's just been a big driver of our ad business. And then our very sophisticated ad platform. Those 4 assets we've built over the last few years, and we're going to keep investing in them and keep growing them. And together, they were instrumental in driving our gross profit for the year of $1.4 billion, which was up 74%. So, over a tough comp. So, we just feel like there's so much opportunity still in front of us. It's still early days in the streaming platform business, which is a big global business, or will be a huge global business. We're going to keep investing for those reasons. And then, of course, there's international, which we're starting to see some good progress on, but it's still very early as well. But Steve, do you want to add any specifics?
Sure. Hey, Justin, thanks for the question. So adding to what Anthony said, in general, we're providing formal outlooks for the near-term quarter, so in this case, Q1, and some color on the full year. You mentioned the revenue growth. We said that we thought for the year that revenue would be in the mid-30s on a year-over-year basis. There's some things that factor into that. Obviously, like Anthony said, we've had successful investments in these key strategic investment areas. Historically, we think there's lots more opportunities out there, both to drive scale and monetization. In terms of the Q1 versus full year view, on a revenue side, on Q1, a couple things to note, and a lot of this has to do with the comp and then the current conditions that we saw coming into the year. And there's a couple things. One is I just point back to Q1, and this is similar to Q2 as well last year. That's a good example of where we saw significant strong performance in the platform monetization side, with revenue growth rates over 100% year over year in Q1 and Q2 of 2021. At the same time, we were curtailing our investment growth in terms of incremental headcount and other spend because of the COVID uncertainty. So that aspect early in 2021 really shows the inherent leverage in the business. So when you fast forward to 2022 in Q1 in particular, what we see is more of a mix shifting into the ad business because of such a strong comp on the content distribution side and M&E side. At the same time, kind of mid last year, we as we got through some of the worst uncertainty around the pandemic, we decided that we would continue, or we kind of go back to our historical aggressive investment levels. And so you're seeing strong investment in the back half of 2021 and into 2022. As a result, we think that, we comp in Q1, and those will be maybe slightly less tough as the year goes through it. And the other part we're tracking is in the back half of 2021, we had strong supply chain disruptions that we're still working through, but we're hoping those will mitigate over time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Laura Martin of Needham. Your line is open.
Hey there. Thanks for taking the question. Do we have Scott on the line today or no?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, Anthony, one for you, one for Scott. Fantastic. So data. Anthony, yours is data. So Vizio makes $40 million a year selling some of their data. Your data is better because you have 3 times as many subs. My question is, would you ever consider as a new revenue stream selling part of your data, although keeping a bunch for your proprietary use, to others as a new revenue stream? Scott.
这个对不起，我插一句啊，这个 Scott 是他的公司的，相当于是 CEO 下面的专门管他的广告平台的，忘了他的姓什么了。就这个分析师的问题，就是这种大脑回路有问题，这种脑洞大开型的，就是没有任何知识含量的，就是问说，哎，你们有很多用户的数据，然后现在市场上，比如有些人是专门收集用户数据卖数据的，那你要不要考虑？然后增加收入，然后把自己最值钱的，然后数据卖掉，然后，所以这种就是什么样的分析师都有吧。
For you, I'm very interested in hearing from you what you think you're most excited about as the ad revenue driver in 2022. Is it international ad growth from like new markets like Mexico? Is it the upfront that's coming up in May? Is it the integration of bottom-of funnel e-commerce with advertising? I'm really interested in where you see the most growth upside and what you're most excited about for 2022. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Lauren, it's great to hear from you again. Sure, I'll take the first question on data. I think, generally we view our data that we generate in lots of different ways, including ACR, automatic content recognition, which I think is the data you're probably referring to. That's an existing Vizio business. But we view that data as basically a key part of our ad platform and a key competitive advantage, and so we don't have any plans to sell it. We sell ads, we sell lots of ads, and that business is growing incredibly fast, and our data is one of the key drivers. And I don't know, when Scott takes the question, maybe he might have an opinion on data as well. It's key to his business.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Data is our most valuable asset, and so is not something we sell. It's also, in our view, the wrong move from a consumer perspective. And frankly, we think the revenue optimal use of data is to keep it and use it for optimizing consumer experience and optimizing advertising. So there are lots of reasons we've chosen to hold that close, consumer-oriented and commercial. And I think actually if you look at some of those other platforms, they're actually regretting their decision and in some cases pulling that data back. With regards to my excitement about 2022 ad opportunities, there are a few things. One is, as you'll recall, we bought a division out of Nielsen last year that includes ACR and linear ad replacement technology. We will be rolling that out to beta in partnership with programmers. I'm very excited about that because it's a whole other ad unit to be sold into the marketplace to extend our reach. I'm also excited about our continued progress in the growth or performance advertising category. We really shine when we can leverage our data and our ad stack to help advertisers drive to real outcomes, product purchases, site visits, etc. 2022 is a big year for OneView as well. We've made good progress with selling OneView into agency holding companies and lots of other advertisers, and I think it'll be a breakout year for us. We just last week announced Nielsen DAR guarantees in OneView. This will enable an advertiser to use our data and our ad stack to optimize for age, gender goals when buying from programmers in the Roku ecosystem. We have sold that product with our own media for years. We're extending it now in what's an industry first to all impressions on the Roku platform. So those are just a few highlights of categories I'm excited about. I guess the punchline is there's just tons of growth opportunity for the ad business. We might have driven 43% lift in ARPU year over year, but we're nowhere near the ceiling of the ad potential in its contribution to the Roku platform business.
Yeah, this is Anthony. You didn't ask me, Laura, but I'll answer anyway. What am I most excited about with our ad business? And I think I would highlight two things. One is just the overall industry state, which is that consumers spend 45% of their TV time watching streaming TV, but advertisers have only moved about 18% of their budgets over to streaming, and you know, all TV advertising is going to move to streaming. So there's just still so much opportunity for us there, both to capture those existing budgets and to continue to innovate. And then the second thing I would highlight is just how powerful the Roku channel has become as a source of ad inventory for us, and how that's driving just this incredible virtuous cycle around content, advertisers, and viewers, and how that's allowing our scale to invest in originals and just really upping the scale needed to be successful in that business. Is creating a big opportunity for us as well.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Corey Carpenter of JP Morgan. Your line is open.
Great, thanks for the questions. I'm hoping you could expand a bit on the drivers that led to revenue, led to revenue coming in below your expectations in 4Q. Was it simply the auto and CPG verticals being weaker than expected, or anything else to call out there? And then on the supply chain, are you starting to see any signs of improvement at all? Or maybe if you could just talk about how you expect that to impact active accounts in 2022. Thank you.
Hey, Corey, this is Anthony. I'll start with some commentary on our platform business, and then unless Scott wants to jump in, or Steve to talk about supply chain. But just in general, you know, our platform business is doing extremely well. If you just look at the big picture, you know, net revenue in 2021 grew 55% to $2.8 billion. That was driven by an 80% year-over-year increase in platform revenue. And there were some extraordinary circumstances. You should take a look at our shareholder letter for the details. But the fundamentals are strong. I mean, ARPU in the quarter was up 43% year-over-year, and there's lots of room to keep growing that. I mean, I mentioned the stat about how such a small part of the ad business has moved to streaming before with Laura's question. I mean, that's just so true, and there's so much room to keep growing ARPU. You know, monetized video ad impressions nearly doubled in 2021. If you look at the Roku channel, which is a key driver of inventory and ad revenue for us, you know, it reached households with an estimated 80 million people. So the business is very strong and still has a lot of room for growth. And it's a diversified business. There's a lot of different sources of revenue in that business: advertising, different kinds of advertising, M&E, you know, content distribution, billing. There's just a lot of sources of revenue into our platform business, and they're all doing great. But I don't know, Scott, if you haven't, or Steve, if you guys want to add.
Yeah, I'll just add a little more color on that, and I think there's the supply chain questions better for Steve to answer. Yeah, just Corey, just breaking down the platform business a little bit more. The M&E, this is our endemic advertising business, is promoting partner apps and content on the platform. Certainly, it's moderating after some major app launches in 2020 and early 2021, but it still is growing very significantly faster than the platform overall. Our growth or performance advertiser segment, these are advertisers who are optimizing the bottom funnel outcomes, roughly doubled. Our brand studio, which is our sales of sponsorships and unique brand integrations and executions on the platform, had its largest quarter yet. And with regards to brand ad sales, advertising, excluding our M&E category, we're still going strong there. I don't want to overemphasize the temporary softness in auto and CPG. It was a relatively minor factor in the quarter. It was also not unique to Roku. Other segments for our brand ad business were up strongly. Restaurants, travel was up 5x, a real bounce back from COVID, financial services. So bottom line is we remain bullish on the continued growth of the platform business.
Steve, do you want to?
Yeah, and just on the supply chain side, as I mentioned earlier, the world continues to seek supply chain disruptions. We think those are coming into 2022, both in terms of elevated component and logistics costs, as well as some continued inventory or component availability issues. I guess the good news is, in some cases, component costs have come back a bit from their peaks that we saw in 2021, but they're still overall very elevated. So there's a way to go between here and normal, but we do expect those to normalize over time. The team's done a good job on the player side of keeping the streaming players in stock, and so the main impact there has been on the gross margin, where we've had the flexibility, thanks to our increasing ARPU, to insulate consumers for the prices, and thus the main impact is on negative gross margin. But we said in our outlook that we do expect that the overall U.S. TV sales market will be down below pre-COVID levels, at least in the short term, and so that's something that's a bit of a headwind for our business in the industry.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Shweta Desoria of Evercore ISI. Your line is open.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me try two, please. One on supply chain. Could you please remind us what role Roku you play within the supply chain? And the follow-up to that is, why not make your own TVs? And then the quick question for Steve is on EBITDA. Steve, did you say 2022 EBITDA to be same level as 2020? I just want to make sure I heard it right. Thanks a lot.
Hey, Shweta, this is Anthony. I'll start and then turn it over to Steve. We interact with the TV supply chain in a bunch of different ways. So, when we talk about device or streaming player supply chain issues, those are products that we build, we design and build and manufacture ourselves. I mean, we use contract manufacturers like the entire industry, but we manage that process. We source the key components or help source the key components. And so supply chain issues around players impact us when the main chips, or what are called SoCs, when they become in short supply because of just general semiconductor shortages. That causes the price to go up. That impacts us in a bunch of ways, including, it costs more to build the products, but also it causes our engineering team to have to spend time redesigning products to use alternate SoCs so that we can get access to more supply. So, it impacts us in a couple ways. But in general, we're managing through that, and those issues are mitigating over time. In terms of TV, TVs, our role with the Roku TV program, which has been, I'll take a quick second and talk about the Roku TV program. I mean, it's been hugely successful for us. This is the program where we design the reference designs for a television, and then we work with manufacturing and brand partners to build and sell those TVs, and then we work with retailers to help merchandise them as well. And that program has been super successful for us, continues to be successful. We're the number one TV platform in the country by unit sales, as well as hours streamed. And, we've become the number one TV platform in Mexico by hours streamed, number one in Canada by hours streamed. We're making great progress in other international markets, a lot of that through our Roku TV program. But in that program, those TVs are built by TV manufacturers around the world and sold through retailers around the world. And so that's the supply chain. And what's been happening in TVs is that there's been a shortage of panels, and then there's also been, it's been much more expensive to ship televisions. It's been more expensive to ship players as well, but TVs are bigger, and so it impacts them more. So the result of all that is TV prices have gone up a lot for consumers, and that's reduced demand for TVs. And so that's the big picture of what's happening. In terms of us making our own TV, there's rumors around that. We don't speculate on rumors. I'll just point out that the Roku TV program is a big area of investment for us. It's been super successful. And we're successful not just because we have, a great purpose-built operating system for TV, but we also are a great partner for manufacturers of TVs. We offer a full stack solution and are really very helpful for them in growing their smart TV market share. So that's some thoughts on Roku TV and supply chain. I don't know, Steve, if there's anything you'd like to add.
Yeah, I think you got it on the supply chain. Shweta, your second question was just around the 2022 EBITDA levels compared to 2020. So yeah, in the prepared remarks, what we talked about is the OpEx investment levels, and we're investing aggressively against a significant opportunity and a lot of great growth vectors, and we have a great platform to build upon. We've talked about some of those things around
investing in the Roku operating system, investing in the Roku channel itself, and then the ad platform, of course. So, one of the key things to mention in terms of the comparison to 2021 or 2020 is the fact that, 2020 was a pre-COVID era, a more normalized basis when we were growing OpEx aggressively against these opportunities. In 2021, mid 2020 and into 2021, we curtailed our investment growth because of the COVID uncertainty, and then we've kind of stepped back on the gas so that the OpEx investment is a bit more aggressive like it was pre-COVID levels. So that combined with where we're at in terms of a more normalized growth in the platform business compared to 2021, where especially in the front half, you had platform growing 100+% based on, strong content distribution and media and entertainment, as well as the fact that the OpEx investment levels were growing much slower. That's leading us, I think, to a better comp in the pre-COVID levels. So we did say that we thought 2022 EBITDA levels would be around the same range as 2020 EBITDA on an absolute basis. So I think that is a fairer comparison versus the surge we saw on the top line in 2021 and some curtailed investment growth at the same time.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Thanks, Anthony.
Sure, Steve. It might be worth just mentioning a little bit about how our TV OEM partners were disproportionately affected by some of the supply chain issues. Yeah, sure. So when you think about the supply chain impacts on the industry, we talked about sort of weaker demand because TV component prices and thus TV consumer prices went up. It's a low margin business, so those largely got passed along. So the overall TV market size did go down in 2021, and we think that below pre-COVID levels, and we think that will continue in the short term. The other piece which impacts TV OEMs in terms of their unit sales and market share, and thus the Roku TV market shares, was some of our OEM partners had specific component and inventory outages, and so that impacted some of their sales in Q3 and Q4, and so that's a big piece that's a headwind for us on the TV side. We were fortunate on the player side to largely have inventory available thanks to our team internally, leveraging our scale and our relationships. So we didn't have the inventory availability on the player side, but that is a material factor the last couple of quarters on the TV side.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Thanks, Anthony.
Sure.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Vasily Karasyov of Cannonball Research. Your line is open.
Scott, I think it's for you. Just wanted to ask you to speak in more detail about media entertainment promotional revenue. Can you tell us about the options that you are offering currently to M&E advertisers, how their price may be, CPM versus performance-based, et cetera? And then if you could also tell us how did effective CPM evolve over time in this type of advertising, and what do you see driving growth going forward? Is it sell-through growth and impression? Do you think you have pricing power or to drive effective pricing up? So get a lot of questions about this revenue stream, so would appreciate your speaking in more detail about it.
Yeah, great question. Thanks, Vasily. Our North Star in the panel on the call. Maybe you can mute. Sorry, on this end. Our North Star on the M&E business is driving outcomes for our clients, and we are uniquely positioned to do this as Roku. First, we've got these promotional units all throughout the Roku experience, from the time you're setting your device up, the ad on the home screen, themes, video ads, email. In many ways, we are the checkout counter at the moment that the consumer is trying to make a choice of what to watch. We're there to influence it. The second reason we're uniquely positioned to do this is we've got the data to target and optimize these promotions. And then the third reason is, especially for our M&E clients, the conversion event, the download of the app, the subscription to their service, happens on our platform. And so we've got a beautiful closed-loop, data-driven way of optimizing to the outcome that our M&E clients care about, which is new users, engaged users, retained users. And that all basically enables us to drive outcomes more efficiently for our M&E clients than the other media they might buy, say, on social media or in linear television. Now, as for your question about how we price it and how that might evolve, today we price on both a CPM or impression basis as well as on a performance basis. You can buy in either way for us. Most of our clients, whether they buy on a CPM or a CPA basis, are ultimately measuring on the outcome that they care about. They'll net it out to that. Our pricing is a function of a lot of factors. In Q4, there's just such competition, as new programming is coming out, that we often have scarcity. So that tends to buoy pricing. But we're also creating more supply throughout the user experience as we build more user engagement in the Roku home screen. So that's an offsetting factor. And then, of course, at the end of the day, this is basically an auction among various bidders trying to get attention from Roku consumers to subscribe to their service, and so that tends to drive pricing. Ultimately, though, our pricing will be driven by our ability to drive the outcomes that these M&E clients seek. And as long as we keep getting better at driving outcomes, which we're doing because of our innovation around how we promote these services and our use of data, we're confident in our ability to keep growing the M&E business and drive deal sizes and pricing. I hope that answers your question, Vasily.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Michael Morris of Guggenheim. Your line is open.
Thank you, guys. Good afternoon. I have a question about revenue and a question about costs. First, on the revenue side, on video advertising revenue, you guys noted monetized ad impressions on Roku channel up 67% this quarter, I believe, which is it's a big number, but still a meaningful slowdown from the doubling you guys have been seeing before. I'm hoping you can break down a little bit for us how much of that was driven by these, supply chain challenged industries that you spoke about versus, how you sort of feel about what that growth trajectory looks like going forward. And my second question, I really want to come back to this spending growth next year. By my math, it looks like your spending is going to almost double to well over $1 billion, just using your revenue and EBITDA guide. It's a pretty huge number. And Steve, I think you just said kind of goes back to pre-COVID levels or behaviors, but it's multiples of what you were spending at that time. Now, you're obviously a much bigger company now, but I think this is a really big deal. I'm coming out of the call, so I want to take one more opportunity to ask sort of in more detail what you're spending on, like which areas you think this is going to power, and when we should expect to see the return, the top line on this incremental spend. Thanks.
Scott, do you want to take the 67% question, which I'm not sure if that was correct.
Yeah, sure. I think the stat you're citing, Michael, is our total monetized video ad impressions, not specific to the Roku channel. We don't break that out for the Roku channel specifically. Roku channel is growing much faster generally in terms of usage, streaming hours, ad impressions than the platform as a whole. It's still a very significant growth rate for us, and represents a huge opportunity for us to keep growing into all the video ad volume that's on our platform. I think your other question is on OpEx. Steve, you want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. Hey, Michael. In terms of the investment areas, Anthony talked about our three core investment areas around the Roku operating system, the Roku channel, and the ad business. And we'll also throw in these investments are not only in the U.S., but they're also in support of international markets as well. In terms of how we usually invest, the main source of investment is people-based, and so that's headcount expense is the largest single line item on our OpEx, and so
We're continuing to invest in, employee expense, existing, where we've been ramping up our hiring rates. So that's very important to the investment. In terms of some of the specific items that we'll talk about, around the Roku channel in particular, one of the things that we've talked about recently is this flywheel effect. So Scott mentioned the Roku channel is growing much faster than the platform overall. That flywheel is driven by content, which is driving increased reach and viewership, which then allows us, since it's primarily AVOD supported, to sell more ads based on the supply from the Roku channel. Really, the scale of the Roku channel and that growth trajectory is allowing us to invest more in the content, and it's a combination of licensing. We got 200 plus licensing partners there, but also in 2021 we basically came out with the Roku original side of the house, which we kickstarted with the acquisition of Quibi's content distribution rights. But we've done a lot on that front as well, and so that is a big piece of that. But within our AVOD model, and then the ad business, there's continued opportunity there. So we're continuing to invest in parts of the technology features. There's a lot of innovation on various roadmaps.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks.
I was just going to say, sorry. I just wanted to jump in and just from my point of view at a high level, the way I think about this is that the streaming platform business is a very large business, and it's going to become an even larger, huger, bigger business. And it's got a huge amount of potential, and it's the kind of business where there's only going to be a small number of winners. In some ways, it's very similar to what happened with, let's go like desktops, for example, where there used to be a lot of different companies that made PC operating systems and PC software. Now there's every PC in the world comes with either Microsoft Windows or Apple Mac OS. Same thing happened with phones. There used to be lots of different companies making phones and phone software stacks, and now every phone that you can buy comes with either Android or iOS. And the same thing's happening in TVs. TVs historically have been very fragmented, lots of different software providers, lots of different places you can get a smart TV operating system, and it's consolidating. And it's going to consolidate down to, a handful of winners. And Roku is the leading operating system in the United States right now. We're making great progress, in other countries as well. And we're just extremely well positioned to keep investing in that leadership position and grow that leadership position as consolidation continues to happen in the platform space. It also applies to other areas like the ad stack. Scale is super important in the ad platform business. It applies to content. The Roku channel has been hugely successful for us. We've been a leader in ad-supported free content. We've gone from licensing a few, low-cost old movies to producing our own multi-million-dollar originals, and that's happened on the back of hugely increasing scale, and that scale supports that kind of investment. And so, there's just a huge opportunity. The stakes are getting bigger, and we're in a unique position that we lead in all these areas, and we can grow our leadership position. And so that's why for us, continuing to invest really just makes a lot of sense financially in our quest to build a huge, large business. And I think we ran this sort of accidental experiment during COVID where we pulled back on the gas on investment in the future, and we saw how EBITDA started flowing to the bottom line. And so, that's what will happen eventually. We will start to normalize, but in these days where we're still pretty early in the building of these streaming platforms, we want to maintain and keep winning with our leadership position.
So could I just ask, is wage inflation a meaningful part of this increase, or how much is just sort of like existing wage inflation versus how much is expanding the areas you're spending on? Just giving your comment that people's such a big part of where the spending's going.
Yeah, Steve. Yeah, I mean, certainly it's a very competitive market out there, so certainly wages are going up, and like I said, that's our number one component in our OpEx, so that is certainly part of what's factored into the outlook. But the main driver is we just keep hiring a lot more people. As we
as we expand each of these key areas. Just one small example, we didn't used to make originals. Now we have a whole team working on Roku originals. We didn't used to sell TVs in Brazil. Now we're building more and more models for Brazil. So those are examples of places where we increase our headcount. And that headcount investment usually comes ahead of the results, right? You have to work on it for a year or two before you start seeing the results.
Thank you. Our next question goes to Jason Helfstein of Oppenheimer. Your line is open.
Hey guys, thanks for taking the question. So I'm going to applaud the investment. For years we heard from investors that you weren't spending enough, so I'm going to echo that. Albeit a tough data report earnings, so kind of sorry about that. So I just want to ask, I don't think anybody asked, but did you kind of say why you missed the revenue guide in the quarter? Steve, just maybe kind of give us just some color there. And then my second question, and I don't know if anyone asked this, saw the announcement with the resale agreement with Entravision in Mexico. Maybe just talk a bit about what you expect out of that. Could that start to be like the first material bucket of international revenue? Thank you. International ad revenue. Thank you.
Scott can take the international revenue question, and then Steve, do you want to answer the other question?
Yeah, Jason, thanks for the kind words, and I appreciate you mentioning the investors that wanted incremental investment. So, yeah, I mean, I think frankly the incremental investment just shows that we're bullish on the opportunity and the growth trajectories have great roadmaps ahead of us. So we think it's the right strategic decision, as Anthony's talked about. The industry is going to consolidate around, and we're in a leading position. In terms of Q4, the biggest theme in terms of the results versus the original outlook expectations were around the level of supply chain disruptions that impacted the industry and our partners and us in particular. Both on the account acquisition side, like we said, it was a smaller TV sales size in the market because of the higher TV prices. I had mentioned that TV prices were up 33% year over year in Q4, which was a tamp down on demand. And then we had specific TV OEM partners that had inventory availability challenges. And so the main impact of that was certainly on the account acquisition side. But what we also talked about was we saw some temporary softness in some verticals around auto and CPG where they had their own inventory availability challenges and so deferred some of the revenue spend. And so that was more pronounced than what we originally thought it would be going into the quarter, and that was the biggest driver of the disconnect.
This is Scott. I'll just tag on to answer to that question, and I'll answer your question, Jason, about Entravision in Mexico. One other thing I'd say about Q4 was we were comping over a really robust Q4 2020. If you roll back to 2020, advertisers really suppressed spending in Q2 2020, and then they made up for it in Q4. It drove a really strong Q4 for us in our ad business and frankly across the business. And so we had a strong quarter in Q4 for the ad business, Q4 21. But the comp, in addition to a couple of the softness in a couple of the verticals that Steve mentioned, were the real drivers of the miss off of the guide. With regards to Mexico, this is a great story, great part of our narrative of going abroad. First we seek scale by getting televisions and players into consumers' hands. Then we try to drive engagement, and then we monetize. And in Mexico, we are through the first and second phases there with significant winning posture in terms of household penetration, user engagement, and so it was very timely for us to launch a Mexican ad business. We're doing it in partnership with Entravision. Internationally, I'd also call out our success in Canada, where we've been scaling our ad business and our M&E business for several years now. So we're excited about the progress in Mexico, and of course, it's also a great entree into activity elsewhere in LATAM.
Yeah, this is Anthony. I mean, if you think about just international and the countries in the Americas south of the United States, the two biggest markets by far are Brazil and Mexico. So that's why we focused on those primarily, and we're doing great in both of those markets. In Mexico, we're the #1 streaming platform by hour streamed, and we just announced that we passed 20% market share for TVs with the Roku TV program. And so, you know, our scale's been growing there for a few years now. That's why we're starting to add on monetization in that region.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Jason Bazinet of Citi. Your line is open.
There was a little bit of a question in the buy side about whether or not you guys would provide sort of a full-year outlook, which I think is unusual for you. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But I'd be curious about two things: why you decided to do that, and then two, sort of what your sort of level of conservatism is or isn't when you sort of lay out a full-year guide versus a quarterly guide, which presumably is much easier. Thanks.
Steve. That's a Steve question.
Yeah, in terms of our approach to outlook, since the start of the pandemic, so, you know, coming on 2 years, we have focused on providing a formal outlook for the near-in quarter, in this case Q1, and providing some color on the longer term or the annual view to the extent we have visibility. And so, you know, what we talked about in the shareholder letter is continuing on with that strategy, you know, permanently, and tweaking the outlook, moving from a range to our best estimate. And so, you know, that's really no different than what we've been doing for the last couple of years. I think it reflects the fact that obviously we have better visibility into the short term. In this case, we didn't provide formal outlook for the full year, but we did provide some color on what we thought the trends were for the full year, and we provided a rough outlook for the revenue year-over-year growth range, as well as the EBITDA level. So, you know, we're kind of somewhere in between, but we think that's prudent just given the level of uncertainty in that factor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Renu Bhattacharya of Bank of America. Your line is open.
Hi, thank you for taking my questions. I have two, one on platform revenues and one on your comments on the Roku OS. With respect to platform revenues, you know, 4Q and the full year, the M&E spend, media and entertainment spend, was very strong. It grew faster than the platform revenues. Can you give us your thoughts on M&E spend for the full year 2022, and just maybe talk about, you know, in the shareholder letter, it says delayed ad spend in verticals most impacted by imbalances may continue into 2022. If we go back to, you know, the pandemic in 2Q of 20, you know, advertisers had pulled back, but they came back pretty quick after that, and 3Q, 4Q were pretty strong quarters for your platform revenues. Just reading the shareholder letter, it seems that, you know, this comeback this year might be delayed. So just your thoughts on when you think the CPG and the auto advertisers might come back and spend more on the platform.
Scott.
Hey, Ruplu. Yeah, let me take this in parts here. First of all, again, I just would not overstate the impacts of those verticals. We saw some softness. I think it's anybody's guess, you know, how the CPG and auto businesses deal with their supply chain issues, but we see robustness broadly across the rest of the ad business. And so, you know, it's a relatively minor factor in the grand scheme of Q4 and our outlook going forward. You know, with regards to the M&E business, we don't guide to that business specifically. I'll just say that it continues to grow strongly. You know, the biggest services have launched on Roku, but they continue to spend very significantly with us because they're not done acquiring users. And as they hit scale, retaining users becomes critical. It's also a very competitive environment. We've seen quite a bit of share shifting within the top 10 apps as they compete for user attention. Consumers aren't going to have, you know, subscriptions to all of these services. They're going to pick and choose. And in a streaming world, it's easy for them to subscribe and unsubscribe. And so there's a lot of competitive pressure on our partners to stay front and center when they invest in big new programming. They want to get behind it and promote it aggressively to users. And as I answered in the question earlier, we're just one of the best possible choices for a programmer to utilize, drive awareness, and tune in to their programming. So overall, we remain really bullish on the future of the M&E business. I don't know, Steve or Anthony, if you want to add anything.
Well, this is Steve. I'll just add, because you mentioned kind of Q2 2020, and it popped back pretty quick with advertisers. I think that part is, certainly there was a pullback in advertising there, but I think it was a very different situation, right? That was early days of the pandemic. There was a lot of uncertainty across the board for advertisers that their business was going to drop off a cliff. And so, that was much more of a stabilize the ship, lower the operating expense burn, and see where the world's going. In this case, where you have certain weakness in the advertising or a temporary slowdown in the advertising, in large part, these companies are selling everything they can produce. And I can tell you, being in the market for an auto, have a lot of pricing power on what they are producing, right? And so they're actually in a position of strength as opposed to a position of concern and weakness. But because of the supply chain constraints, there's kind of an artificial disconnect where they're not having to market. But there is a strong case for marketing and advertising once things normalize on that front. So to Scott's point, I think it's certainly the supply chain disruptions are the main determinant in certain verticals about kind of whether their spend levels will be normalized or not. But I actually think a lot of these companies are in a very strong position, and it's just this temporary disconnect of supply and demand that's created a temporary stop in spend. But otherwise, they're in great shape versus at the start of the pandemic, they were quite fearful for their well-being.
So Rufu, I don't know if that answered your question or not. And also, did you have something you wanted to ask about Roku OS? I wasn't sure. There was a question there.
Thank you. Our final question is Rich Greenfield of Lightshed. Your line is open.
Hi, thanks for taking the question. I guess two big picture questions. One, Anthony, when you think about sort of the change in consumer behavior, moving from dongles to TVs, just wondering, do you have any way of telling how many people, because I think one of the things people or investors fear is that as people move from sort of Roku dongles and then they buy a new television, that some of those are sort of inactive, or those sort of active accounts become inactive accounts. I'm just wondering, it's sort of like, as the shift from dongles to TVs play out, what are you seeing? What have you seen over the last year? And what do you think happens over the next couple of years? And then obviously, I mean, it's sort of the obvious that everyone is sort of panicked about the state of streaming after seeing the results from some of the players, most notably Netflix earlier in the quarter, sort of revising long-term TAM. And I just, when you think about the TAM of streaming, 300 million, 500 million, $1 billion, Jason Kylar said someone's going to get to $1 billion. Curious what you think of the streaming market globally and where you think the TAM really lies and the time to get to that TAM. Thanks.
Sure, great questions. We have 0 minutes left. I'll do my best. Let's see, on TV versus streaming players, they're both important to us, to our business. And we still sell, we sell millions and millions of both. I think, and I think so. Some of the dynamics there are that we sell a lot of streaming players to people that have an older TV or a competitor smart TV that doesn't quite have the features that they would like to get or the content that they want. And then when someone buys a new TV, they'll take the older TV and move it into a bedroom, and they'll often want to upgrade that with a streaming player. And so there's just a lot of different dynamics. They're both important. They're both big sources of active accounts. They're both not going away anytime soon. But I would say, I guess, strategically, TVs are probably more important just because, when you buy a smart TV, if you buy a smart Roku TV, then whatever you had before you don't need, because it's a great solution. And people keep them for about 7 years roughly. There's questions about how long will software updates happen on a smart TV. We try very hard to keep updating our smart TVs for a long time. And we're better at that than everyone else in the industry, who will sometimes abandon or stop doing software updates to their TV after a few years. That also becomes a great place for us to sell a streaming player too. So they're both really important. And if you look, when you go overseas, there's a lot of older TVs, and so they're both just very important for us. They have subtly different dynamics, but I think the main message is just we need to do both, and we do both very well. In terms of the TAM, I think of it as every broadband household that watches TV is going to switch to streaming. So it's it's 1 billion households.
Yeah, and I just add to
Do you have any feel of just why it slowed down so much?
Sorry, why what?
Well, what slowed down?
Do you have any sense of why do you think there's been this slowdown that sort of has panicked investors? I'm not even talking about your stock. I'm talking about the entire streaming sector, that people have sort of started to really just get concerned.
Well, I think. Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to say, look, the market's reception to this or that streaming company's results, and notwithstanding, as Anthony said, the number of households consuming television, what they spend on television, what their eyeballs are worth in terms of advertising hasn't changed through all of this. So the TAM really has not changed, and while I think individual streamers will, their fate and their perception in the market will rise and fall according to their performance, at the end of the day, they're all going to be on Roku and competing for share. And we see that playing out like never before on our platform. And it's great, ultimately, for the consumer and great for Roku.
Yeah, I would just say that there's important differences, strategic differences between a streaming service and a streaming platform like Roku. They're both great businesses to be in right now, in terms of the fact that they're all growing. But our goal as a platform is to offer as many different services as possible and give our consumers options. And I think if you're a streaming service, your dynamics are different. If you're one of the early streaming services, you didn't really have much competition for a long time, and now consumers have other options. So that's one dynamic. And also, there's just a lot of change happening right now. So and then the rise of free streaming services like the Roku channel, which is doing gangbusters. There's just a lot of different dynamics affecting the industry. But at a high level for us, we've built a business model where we can monetize, and we do monetize, most streaming services on our platform, and provide tools to allow them to be successful, and try and be a great partner, try and provide a good marketplace, try and help the consumer find content, and just provide a solution that works for the entire industry. And of course, streaming is just going to keep growing, and there'll be 1 billion households that use a smart TV to watch TV. And there's only going to be a small number of those different platforms that win.
Thank you. I'd like to turn the call back over to Anthony for any closing remarks.
All right, well, I just want to say thanks to everyone, thanks to our employees and our investors for joining the call today. And we're looking forward to continuing our growth and the robust streaming business that we're in continuing. So thanks, everyone.
所以他们就讲完了。所以我是这样想，这家公司啊，我们刚才就是大概总结一下这次的财报，大家对它的反应。我的感觉是，看一个公司，你要首先了解它的就是远景，就这个公司的市场怎么样，产品怎么样，未来有多长的跑道可以继续增长，它的单位经济效益如何，然后以及管理层怎么样，这几点我们其实在之前很多视频都讲过了，尤其是我讲怎么分析一家刚上市的公司，对不对？市场、产品、单位经济效益和管理层这4点。然后，所以每一次财报都是我们 每次财报和后面的电话会议，像这样的场合，都是我们重新来审视我们对这家公司之前做的这些判断有没有问题。问题呢，如果有问题的话，又可以分成2种，就是首先很多公司可能没有问题，比如说 Upstart 那种公司财报发出来，你就不管怎么挑剔去仔细看每一个数字，你都看不出来它哪里有问题。这样公司肯定也有，但是多数公司在一些短期至少都会有一些磕磕碰碰，有些小的问题。所以遇到这些问题，我们首先要做一个判断，说这个问题是短期的还是一个长期的，就是结构性的问题，我们讲的，对吧？短期的问题就是说它随着时间过去，比如说疫情过去supply chain 这个问题解决了，或者是前面几年它增长比较快，所以跟那个比较显得那个增长比较慢，这些问题都是短期的，就是一旦过去一段时间这就不存在了。所以这些问题是短期要单独看。还有另外一些问题就是结构性的问题，比如说像最后那个分析师一直纠缠的那个问题，我觉得本身那个问题质量不高，但是确实是现在市场上很多人在想的，就是我刚才讲的4点中的第1点，市场比如说 Netflix 的财报大家反响不好，然后 Roku 的财报反响又不好，所以包括这个分析师在内，很多人现在就在琢磨说，这个 streaming 这个流媒体这个市场是不是不像我们想象中那么好啊，对不对？市场是不是说比原来想象中要小？所以你看大家不管是做没有广告的 Netflix， 还是做广告的这种免费的streaming 的 service， 像 Roku 怎么就是增长好像都有问题，所以这是对市场的一个宏观的判断。所以如果这样的问题就是长期结构性的问题，如果我们通过一次财报再加别的分析，然后证明说我们可能之前比如说我们认为这个我们之前听了 Netflix 听了 Roku 的管理层看了很多东西，认为未来的所有的电视都是流媒体，也就意味着它的市场就是10亿用户，10亿个家庭，就几乎是你只要家里将来有人做娱乐，然后要看电视，那肯定是流媒体，那肯定这就是它的总共的市场大小。如果我们之前认为是这样，后来经过这一次财报发现是这个错了，那你就要重新调整对这家公司的估值比如说我们现在突然发现一个重大问题，说那个10亿变成了5个亿，或者甚至变成了1个亿那当然对于 Roku 也好 Netflix 也好，对这些公司的估值肯定要变的，就是说这是长期的结构性的问题，对吧？所以这是我讲说分析一家公司的方法。就这家公司来讲，我听了2遍他的电话会议，看了他的信，我的感觉是我不觉得他有长期的结构性的问题所以这是第一个。比如说它的市场，我不觉得说现在的市场跟6个月之前有什么区别，我觉得这个趋势不会变的，对吧？流媒体肯定还是趋势，这个不会变的。那从产品来讲，它之前比如说领先于什么 Apple 亚马逊和 Google 的那些不同的方案，我觉得这个市场其实你看它管理层也没有提到市场竞争，没有提到产品和别人公司抢夺它市场份额，分析师也都没有问题，对不对？这方面意味着这些方面产品上它并没有变得比原来更差。单位经济效益就是 unit economics， 我们一直知道它其实不太好，因为它成本比较多，然后又加上发展，所以这3个没有变化。但这个财报让我开始对第4点，对它管理层，我之前就讲过，这家管理层算不上最优秀所以你如果是听他的财报，我觉得有几点，我觉得让我对管理层可能评价稍微又下降了一点点。比如说他现在的问题当中，其实有些是可以避免的。我们刚才有人问到说，你这个分析师问到说，你为什么第4季度没有达到你自己的预期广告的收入，对吧？我觉得这是应该要避免的。管理层如果你制定了，然后你对整个公司业务比较了解的话，不应该达不到预期他达不到预期原因是什么？原因是说他的广告的收入比较单一，都是那种 我们之前好像推特那一集讲过啊，广告分成2种，一种是品牌广告，一种是那种效果广告。电视上打的多数是品牌广告，比如说汽车呀、什么可口可乐这些打，就他在电视上打广告是为了让你记住这个牌子，让你产生这种喜爱这个品牌的那种爱情这种感觉啊，这种让你爱上这个牌子啊，他不是说让你看了这个之后马上就去买某个汽车，或者马上就冲到商店里去买可口可乐，是吧？所以它不是一个直接的要引起消费者的效果的这么一个广告，所以这种叫品牌广告。但是呢，我觉得这家公司之前过去几年，它在这个广告方面，我觉得进展不像我们刚才以前讲过那家 The Trade Desk 进展那么快，它很多收入还是集中在这一块品牌广告上，所以我觉得这是管理层的我觉得问题之一。第二个，他其实刚才也承认了，就是有一个分析师也提到了，很有意思，他说投资界了，之前很多人认为说你们的投入太少啊，所以管理层也承认说他们在2020年疫情刚爆发的时候，虽然它各方面增长都不错，但他们还是出于谨慎或者别的原因，他们其实是收缩了自己的业务，就是说应该是在疫情期间收入增长，大家在你平台上花的时间越来越多，各方面指标都很好的情况下，那你应该怎么做？应该是说加大，出于对自己公司的信心，应该加大投入去招人，然后去做扩展到不同的产品线和不同的市场，但他们反而收缩了，就是把招人的速度下降了。所以在那个几个季度之内，你如果去看他的财报，他的那个收入好像就是至少调整过的 EBITDA， 这个整个增长很快，所以那段时间大家好像对他反响很好，也是有这个原因，就觉得说他收入好像规模上来了之后一下增长很快，但其实那是他相当于是成本收缩的原因，那个成本收缩我觉得现在看起来明显是错误为什么你高速增长的时候你可以高速投入，大家看到你齐头并进，市场对你不会有太大的惩罚。在你现在你知道你进入了一个增长的一个变缓的期间，你又突然意识到你之前投入太少了，你现在要增加投入未来1年要做10亿美金的运营费用，又去招很多人，扩展到不同的市场，所以你的收入下降的情况下，费用又大幅增加，所以这个是双刃剑，两边都砍你自己，所以这种形式其实是管理层的判断失误。我觉得他们当时在疫情刚发生的几个月就是太过于保守，所以这是一个。还有一个就是这个讲的比较长，就是说你如果看他公司整个过去几年的历史，他一开始是非常清楚讲说我们不做自己的原创内容，就他想象的世界是这样，就是说Netflix 这些 Disney 这些他们都做自己的内容，但是呢做原创内容很花钱所以呢我是一个中立的一个平台，所以我把这个平台建得很大，然后里面用户很多，那你所有的那些做原创内容那些做流媒体的公司，你都要来我的平台跟我的用户见面，让我的用户去订阅你的服务，对不对？所以我只做一个中立的什么瑞士国像这样的，然后你都来，然后给我付租金，然后我这样业务就很好。但后来才发现光是这种问题是它这个就是优势不强，为什么呢？因为这个相当于你的 moat 护城河不高很多人都可以做，比如说像亚马逊像 Google 都可以做成这样的东西，所以你要想吸引很多人来看你的节目，你光是放几个别的那些收费的频道不可以，你必须要自己提供很多免费的而且质量比较好的内容，对吧？人家可能穷，不愿意每个季度花这么多钱去订阅这么多的不同的流媒体的服务，但是人家还是想说能看到的内容在免费的频道上看广告，但收看的内容他们不想比像 Netflix 迪士尼的内容差得太多 OK， 所以他对这个消费者的判断我觉得还是出现了问题，所以他后来过了几年之后才意识到说原创内容他一定要做，所以最近几年他才开始投入，然后这是为什么他那个运营费用增加的其中一部分。然后所以我的感觉是这样，就是说通过这几件事情，就是说可以看到比如说他的广告收入然后放缓或没有多元化他在错误的时间选择了收缩，以及 没有一开始就知道自己需要做原创内容，所以这几点下来看起来就是说，管理层质量不错，也没有看到明显，比如说欺骗那个投资者的情况，但总体质量如果相比像 Netflix 这些公司，那质量当然还是要差一些。所以说这是我对它的判断，就我觉得说这家公司从长期还是，成功还是大概率事件，对吧？之前大家可能把它估值推得比较高，但现在估值下来非常多。如果看它未来几年，然后这个跑道持续增长，还是应该没有问题的。就是当然，比如说每年是30%增长，还是40%增长，还是什么时候能够恢复之前50%以上的增长，还有没有可能？这个需要后面去判断。但现在看下来，至少像他这样做的这么大规模的这种单独的独立的流媒体的免费的平台，然后市场上就这么一家，所以他还是有自己的优势。只是从管理层的角度，我觉得不是第一流吧，应该算是第二流的管理层。所以这是我对他的判断。所以我们现在在OK 已经1个半小时了 ，sorry 讲太多了。然后我们看一下大家的问题。所以第一个说用户是不是不会增加了？他现在活跃用户数已经超过了 Cable。不是这样的。OK， 我们刚才讲了它的用户是全球应该是封顶是10亿，它现在才6000万，对不对？而且这个你的比较也有问题。美国的 Cable 就是那个有线电视、有线付费电视，对不对？过去10几年，由于互联网的出现，像这种流媒体出现，每年是在下滑的，所以你不能跟 Cable 去相比。Cable 那个本身，大家认为它到最终是会下降到一个很小的数字，就是只有那个极其热衷体育的体育迷才会继续可能留着自己的 Cable， 因为其他的相信多数的东西全都会挪到那个互联网这种流媒体的方式，所以它肯定在美国它是确实有一定的饱和度，但是它也没有达到 Netflix， 好像 Netflix 在美国应该接近8000万，对不对？所以它在美国还有增长，在全球当然增长空间更大，所以从用户数量来讲，它远远没有到封顶那个地步。OK， 这位同学讲说，《继承之战》看了2集，觉得里面的人脑子都不大正常。是的，就是有钱的人，尤其到那个水平的有钱的人，脑袋跟我们都不是一个回路的这就为什么像巴菲特这种人这么了不起，就你有那么多的财富，但是你能保持自己原本的样貌，然后不会被这个财富改变了你的思维你的改变你周围太多的生活方式，这很不容易做到。这位同学问有没有关注 Unity， 会不会说一下？不会。Unity 我们之前好像去年很早就讲了这家上市的公司，我觉得它管理层有问题所以不会说。OK， 然后刚好提到 Netflix， 假设订阅费用还是主要来源，当然是它主要来源，感觉他们未来还有很多变现的方式。周边产品、游戏，未来应该是可以蛮期待。我知道所以 Netflix 我们上次不是讲过了吗？我觉得说 Netflix 我觉得长期没有问题。其实他要想现在只是为了缺钱的话，他可以做的东西其实很多。但是公司管理层我觉得他会选择比较克制，就是他们不会一下做太多的东西。上次电话会议里面好像 Hastings 还讲了，他说我们通常只做1件事或者2件事情，比如他们现在第一个是什么呀？第一个是要把自己的电影做起来，因为之前大家看好的是说，电视剧它好像经过几年的原创的创造了，已经现在很多艾美奖都是他拿了，对吧？电视剧的内容虽然有些人看不上，比如我本身看他的电视剧也比较少，看的都是相对偏门的一点，但是他的就是在主流上那些电视剧质量不差，对不对？所以他现在主攻的反而是那种大的电影像去年了，想起来去年的那几部大的电影，后面还会每年会做的大的电影制作，他就想在未来几年把电影的水平也能提高到一个好莱坞主流的可以跟漫威宇宙的那种电影水平相比的那个水平所以这个其实是不容易做到的。所以他现在做的第一件事情这个，第二件事就是游戏，对不对？游戏比如说他怎么做出来能够提高大家 对这些 IP 的认可，然后让大家比如说在那个什么Stranger Things 来，这个季刚播完，可能还要好几个月才有下一季，那中间怎么保持这些 fans 啊，这些粉丝的忠诚度？他就给你可以设计游戏，让你玩游戏，一边玩游戏一边增加热爱，然后一边在等着下一季。所以他现在主要做的就是电影、游戏这2件事情估计不会一下在遍地开花，再做很多别的业务长期我不觉得是问题，而且现在估值确实都很低目前Roku是否可以持有，我觉得这个只能自己判断，我个人感觉并不，至少现在并不贵OK。这位说 Unity 在占据绝大市场份额的情况下，仍然无法达到盈利，很难想象未来几年有多大改进。对，就是它的问题有很多方面，管理层是一方面，另外一个你看它，其实很多人把它看成什么元世界啊、Metaverse 这些东西，但问题是它主要业务是广告，它其实就是一个游戏广告的一个平台为主的。这个问 Makeda 还看好吗？还看好，还看好，但是这样的公司问题是什么？比如我没法估值因为它现在收入比较小，所以你可以有想象力，想象它未来会怎么样收入以及达到盈利水平。但是在现在这种市场，然后卖盘压力很大的情况下，比如它会那个价格被拉到什么样的价位才停下，这个谁也说不好。所以呢，就是这个我长期看好，因为看好它的市场产品，管理层也看不出有问题。而且我之前讲过，你看它的管理层，他给 CEO 的那个奖金，就是说好像这个就是给的那个门槛非常高，要比上市的价格高很多，才能拿到比较大的股权。所以这就证明管理层比较有信心。所以长期是看好的，但我没法设一个价格，所以我没有决定要不要买还。所以这个问说 Palantir 我们不是讲过了吗？这家公司我不会考虑的，这种不停发股票，不停就是我觉得，比如像马斯克很多人看他不顺眼，但是这个人其实还比较厚道，就是说他可以变成世界首富，几千亿美金可以拿着股票拿着期权，我觉得股东不应该抱怨，为什么呀？因为只有你股东拿到上万亿，他才能拿到那个几千亿，我觉得这种呢是公平的。就是股东拿大头，他拿小头。当然了，股东有很多，他只有一个人，所以他的小头已经超过世界上所有人的财富，这是另外一回事。但至少是说，在股东先赚钱的情况下，你的 CEO 才应该暴富。但有些人他有那种上帝情节，知道吗？上帝情节就是那种 mental 就是精神病，就他觉得说，这家公司是我创立的我创立的。所以意味着说这是我的，就像有些人说这孩子是我的，所以我杀了他也不应该犯法，这种都是很荒谬的思想。这个公司是你创立的没问题，对吧？但你如果说我不上市，我全是用自己的资金意志来自己经营然后我也不求人不融资，那你想给自己发多少钱完全无所谓，对不对？但一旦上市，你的公司就不是你自己了，因为你要面对公开市场，别人投资了，所以你要为大家负责，而不是为自己负责。所以有些公司 CEO 就会有这种上帝情节，觉得说既然是我创造的，意味着说首先我要拿大头，所以不管给股东有没有带来收益，他自己先把最大的一头拿掉我觉得 Palantir 就是这种情况，所以就不停发，然后比如说他也许消停1年，然后说可能那个 cash flow 转成正的，那你觉得好像公司不错，然后明年可能又给自己大发一笔，所以这个人一旦有这种情节，我觉得这种没救的所以这种公司我是不考虑的。就是你如果是在比较低的位置拿到了，然后长期持有，仍然有可能盈利，但是我的意思是说，市场上非常高质量的公司有很多，我就不去凑这个热闹，然后跟这些人还要期待着他良心发现，然后能让我赚一点钱，就是没有必要做到这种。Redfin 不知道让大家对 OpenDoor 看法影响大不大？我还没有仔细研究它的财报但我看了一下推特上的反响，他好像是CEO 好像提到了说 Zillow 退出了，对它的 iBuying 是一个好消息。它其实 iBuying 它的那个互联网卖房的那个数量非常非常少，而且它的 margin 只有1%。但问题是什么呢？它的其他业务没有什么增长，所以光是这块的增长已经占了好像它的市值的很大部分。所以市场对就是说这个消息可能对 Open Door 应该是好消息，意味着说如果连这样的公司做这种互联网卖房都能至少有一点毛利，那 Open Door 肯定更没有问题。我之前讲过这个观点，就是它在这个市场当中有几个竞争对手非常重要，因为 Zillow 吧之前是完全没有算法，都是乱来的，所以他给的那个价都是比市价比那公平的价格高很多，所以你有这么一个搅局的，他就会把那个整个市场那个期望值提高，所以很多人就是说，哎，他一看到 Zillow 这么高的报价，他有可能就不去拿跟 Open Door 做生意，对不对？所以这对 Open Door 其实不利的。现在这种搅局的终于被踢出去了，自己做不下去了，那对剩下的这几家肯定是好消息。那剩下这几家当中 ，Open Door 毫无疑问是最大的，所以对它的，如果对 Redfin 都是利好的话，那对 Open Door 只是更大的利好。所以我是这么理解的。这个问 Affirm 有什么计划买吗？我在想，我可能周末要常考一下，就是假定如果是股市是这样的价位，然后我剩余的资金怎么分配，我还没有决定，但是 Affirm 是会在考虑之内。OK， 所以我是不是大家的问题都回答完了？是不是？是的 ，OK。所以呢，我们今天就这样，对不起，又1个小时40分钟我们明天刚才讲了，明天是会员 only，OK， 是专给会员的节目，不是 Open Door， 做 Upstart，它的最新发布的年报的我们一起过一下，然后再回答一下大家的问题，好吧？明天同样是10点半，然后可能后天就休息一天，让我想一想，大概在什么价位买哪家公司的股票，看如果下周有机会的话，好不好？谢谢大家，祝大家周末愉快，再见。